Is it not rare the case for a psychologist to interview a deaf patient and to interact with a British Sign Language interpreter during the clinical interview?
As a clinical psychologist, we base our job on the relationship with the patient. So we communicate with the patient in order to help him. In the case of a deaf patient, there is a third actor in this relationship, which is the interpreter. Hence, the clinical setting for clinical psychology with a deaf patient, it's a triadic relationship, and this must be recognized by the professional, by the patient, and by the interpreter.
I think this experience is so vital for the knowledge exchange of both parties, because so often we teach interpreters in isolation about interpreting studies and we don't overlap with the other fields that they'll be working in. And likewise, I think a lot of mental health professionals don't have any exposure to working cross-culturally, working with people from different cultures and who speak different languages.
It would be useful just in terms of understanding other people, and that there are different realities that you should be able to consider, and that there are difficulties that we need to overcome as people, and in terms of labeling and in terms of communication between ourselves.
Very few courses in the UK actually train mental health professionals anything about deaf people or the deaf population. So although it is a small instance group, the impact and the risk for misdiagnosis is so high that it's really important that I think students of psychology and in that profession get to meet a deaf person before they go into clinical practice, so that it takes away that initial kind of shock and what do I do and how do I behave, that they've had that experience in a training situation and that practice, so that they're more confident when that does happen, whether that's next week or 5 years down the line.
I think if you don't understand the people that you're speaking to, and you don't understand the etiquette or anything about how to talk to them, then they're not going to have a rapport with you. And if they think that you're a bit rude or that you haven't bothered to understand them, then you're not going to be able to understand the problems that they have got. So I think it's just you showing that you've made the effort to have a bit of understanding from the get-go, and then they're more comfortable. So I think that they get not anywhere near as good a healthcare because of the communications issues, that they can't express exactly what it is that they've got if those signs aren't available.
It's been an interesting experience meeting the students, the psychology students, who some look very nervous, probably the first time they met a deaf BSL user. That's probably not helped their anxiety. But my role today has changed a little. I'm a depressed character. I have a lot of issues, no motivation, quite down. However, the students have found it very difficult how to actually ask or pose questions.
You have to be more literal in your application. We was mentioning there about using the word mood, and how I would say to my children, why are you moody today? Meaning moody, angry. And the deaf person would say the same thing, I'm not angry. But so you'd use the word feelings maybe instead of mood, because you have to be more literal with your questioning rather than, towards a deaf person.
Going into today, I thought that they'd have a perfect understanding of English, and that BSL was like a bit on top of that they use that in daily life because it was easier than trying to speak or trying to read. But knowing that I can't go in as a psychologist or as a person and just write down everything and expect them to be able to read it perfectly.
It was really important to understand the role of a translator in a clinical setting, and just how someone would go about trying to communicate with someone who is deaf.
In our training, both psychologists and British Sign Language interpreters are immersed in the deaf culture to get hands-on experience on how to interact with a deaf patient in the clinical setting.
Today, I feel, has been so important, so important. It's opening barriers, and the barrier is to make people aware. So in the future, if you do work with deaf people, you can be more open. So you don't forget, you're not anxious, you are more professional, trying to ask and actually devolve the right information from the clients.
The professionals that are out there in the world, both interpreters and psychologists, don't actually have awareness of the other points of view. So interpreters often don't know what psychologists' goals are in particular settings, and psychologists don't often have access to that deaf awareness.
Increase in awareness for both interpreters and psychologists has the final aim to help all the people involved in the clinical relationship to reach the final goal, which is well-being for everyone in spite of the differences.